You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC out of Indianapolis. We've got a lot of news that is coming in as quick as we can sling it back out to you. So let's dig right in. First of all, there is news that the United States, through Steve Witkoff, has offered the Russian Federation a very favorable deal to end the war in Ukraine. And this is according to the Polish news station Visegrad 24. And from them also, the Polish outlet Onet claims to have obtained details of the proposal presented by Witkoff during his meeting with Vladimir Putin yesterday. According to the report, the offer includes a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, not a peace treaty, but again, the Trump administration is currently pushing for a peace treaty very quickly. Number two, de facto recognition of Russia's territorial seizures, with the issue postponed for 49 or even 99 years. So the Donbass and the Crimea would, for the time being, be recognized as Russian territory. Lifting a lot of Western sanctions against Moscow, a return to importing Russian gas and oil in the long term for the international community. And then, as far as at least is being reported, no guarantees on halting NATO expansion. That's a big one because that's what Putin was throwing a big fit about. And then no promise to stop military aid to Ukraine. So it appears that if this were true, because Russia has suggested through diplomats so far that this is a very favorable deal, and they're actually really interested in maybe saying yes to this one, that would be a huge step in the right direction. It appears that Trump levying some large tariffs and then some secondary freezes on trade with different actors who are taking in resources, a kind of a pseudo-sanction situation here regarding Russia. It looks like these might actually be weighing on the Kremlin already. So we'll keep you in touch with that. We'll keep you up to date if anything changes on that. That brings us to a couple of massive bombshells. Now, here is how things have gone in this, the 200th day of the Trump administration. Every day we wake up, there is some more major news that has been released, a new strategy from the White House, 8 or 9 new executive orders to be signed, a series of legal actions, a couple of press conferences. People are all over the place. No two cabinet secretaries, unless they're behind Trump at the podium, are ever in the same place for more than a few days at a time. It is a very busy, happening administration. And in this, what we have seen is a series of bombshell reports released from various offices on things that the Biden administration, or before it, the Obama administration, had used to manipulate, to commit perhaps obstruction of justice, fraud, a number of very bad things that have been rather scandalous, either in the mental cover-up of Joe Biden, or the Russiagate scandal, or the cover-up of the Hillary scandal, and on she goes. Well, most recently, it appears that not only did the Biden administration's Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, not only were they going through the Florida and Carolina disaster recovery with the one individual that was exposed for basically sending out a text saying, if you have any Trump signs in any yards, you help them later. You don't help any Republicans, prioritize helping the Biden fans or Kamala Harris fans. Again, this is right before the election. And it was a really, really terrible look. And the legacy media assured you, and they assured me, not that any of us really remember it, because the media makes promises like this every day and is proven wrong about 15 minutes later, that this was an isolated incident. Do you remember this? That, this didn't come from the top down. No. Biden wants everyone to have aid and federal recovery and all this wonderful good stuff. And if you're really concerned about that, you're just being schizophrenic and paranoid. How could you think that? Well, according to Miranda Devine at the New York Post, Joe Biden abused his authority in this particular instance by turning FEMA into a far-left political machine. So she begins off by discussing that the Biden administration abused power by turning the entire mechanism of federal government essentially into a Democrat voter mobilization campaign. These are, according to new unearthed White House documents viewed exclusively by the New York Post. They say the worst offender, however, was FEMA, under the Department of Homeland Security, which is, of course, was under Alejandro Mayorkas. Now, when responding to an emergency or a natural disaster, FEMA employees were directed to make voter registration a key priority. So consider this. You and those in your neighborhood and your community, you have just survived a horrible storm, whether that be a hurricane, whether that be the wildfires, some kind of a natural disaster out west, the Maui wildfires. Somewhere, somehow, you have been impacted by a major national catastrophe in your region of the country. And FEMA shows up to your door, and you're expecting, thank God, maybe the authorities are here and they're going to, again, Reagan warned that the scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I am here to help. How is FEMA there to help? Were they there to provide, food, information on nearby shelters, perhaps something on when power and internet might be back up, maybe some medical provision and care, some transportation? Nope. FEMA was brought in to target voter registration was top of mind for Biden. And it gets worse. Left-wing nonprofits, NGOs, because of course they were brought in to educate FEMA staff about equity and voter access for individuals affected by the disaster. What does this mean? It means that FEMA would bring in all of these DEI groups, these NGOs, George Soros-funded NGOs, and then paid for by you, the taxpayer, they would instruct FEMA staff how to target individuals in a natural disaster who were black, brown, again, the term brown means absolutely nothing, and then LGBTQ plus groups. So if you were in an area that was hit by a natural disaster and you had the just unlucky shucksy doodles fate of being born white and straight, well, sucks to be you, because they're busy giving voter registration forms to individuals in minority communities first. Whether or not that's on the way, whether or not they're individuals in various communities who might, live in the same space, they were more concerned about equitable results and voter registration. That is what the entire Biden Federal Emergency Management Agency was devoted to. To say this is a scandal is far too soft. What an absolute disgrace. And remember, the Biden administration, guys, they did this internal investigation after it was discovered that one of the Biden people, who, by the way, later went on to be a whistleblower and said, I was told all the time to prioritize Kamala Harris and Biden people. How would they know who were Kamala Harris and Biden people? Because they had access to the voter registration data. So they could see in this state if you had voted in a Republican or a Democrat primary or had registered to vote as a Republican or a Democrat. There you go, folks. Linked back together. That's the rest of the story. Alejandro Mayorkas, if you played any part of this, again, we can talk about the treason of using the FBI to go after a political opponent. That is horrible. That is terrible. That is a despicable use of the American justice system. That should be fully prosecuted. And I believe that Comey and Brennan, if guilty of what those emails clearly show they're guilty for, should be in prison for the rest of their lives. But to order a federal aid agency to provide aid based on voter registration is one of the sickest things that possibly could use your tax dollars for. An atrocious use of the American political system and government. Now, according to the New York Post article, the Florida scandal was alongside the Hurricane Helene, Maui wildfires, Hurricane Ian, the East Palestine train derailment in Ohio. Now we have a lot of instances where there deserve to be full federal investigations in how FEMA was directed to provide aid or voter ID forms. This brings us over to the next big piece of data that's coming out, the jobs reports and numbers. So we're going to have to send the radio crew over to commercial. We'll be back with you guys in just a second. Actually, we're going to be cutting over to Reagan Reese from the White House in just a moment. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. We're going to continue on the live stream. So the job reports and numbers. So you will remember that during the Biden administration, that there would be a Bureau of Labor Statistics report that would come out every single month, and Biden would boast about all of these jobs that he was making in the country. And yeah, sure, a lot of those jobs were federal jobs. And every couple of months, they would essentially fib about why the jobs numbers came in so well. And well, actually, they were a lot worse than we originally thought. Stephen Moore, fellow at the Heritage Foundation and a good friend of mine in the show as well, he was with Trump today releasing some new economic data. And it shows that the Biden administration as a whole not only goofed up jobs numbers, just from time to time. The Biden administration overestimated how many jobs they created and then bragged about it by 1.45 million. That is insane on a statistical level. Check it out.
Yes, George. Thank you, Mr. President. So I called the president because I had some very good news from some new data that we've been able to put together that no one has ever seen before, and I'll just very quickly go through these. So I was telling the president that he did the right thing in calling for a new head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because this shows that over the last 2 years of the Biden administration, the BLS overestimated job creation by 1.5 million jobs. Mr. President, that's a gigantic error. And I don't know if I'm not.
It might not have been an error. That's the bad part. If it was an error, it would be one thing. I don't think it's an error. I think they did it purposely.
Now, there's a lot of back and forth and complaining. Well, of course, that's not necessarily political. I'm just going to say this to all of the algorithmists out there who are saying, well, actually, the labor statistics are calculated using complex algorithms. If the errors always seem to go in one direction during one party's administration, and the errors always seem to go in the other way in the other party's administration, then you know what? That's like an incredible odds record. If every single time that you and I are facing each other in blackjack, I always win, and then as soon as I play someone else, I always lose in blackjack, something ain't right. So, again, just a little bit more on the massive amount of insanity. And of course, then we get to the census. Because as we get more information out about the census that was taken in 2020, it's way worse than we had originally believed. The census that was previously taken is perhaps one of the most egregious miscounts that we've seen from the Census Bureau, that not only overcounted blue states, undercounted red states, but also allotted far more than we had originally expected in illegal immigrants counting as a constituent in the census, which is it's unconstitutional. That's not what it was set up for. We're going to get to that a little bit later here. First, I do want to point out that under the Trump administration, because you might think, well, how's FEMA doing now? Governor Andy Beshear, a Democrat from Kentucky, was describing how the Trump administration has been so far on this. This is courtesy of Nick Sordor sent this over to us.
Trump's FEMA on the ground has done a good job in Kentucky.
Yeah.
They have bettered their customer service. We're not getting nearly as many complaints. They're getting a lot of money through individual assistance out to families, especially after flooding. It's actually a credit to his administration.
I mean, it seems that every time we have some kind of administration on the right, things work exactly how they're supposed to. And then when you look at how the Democrats manage an administration, Pete Buttigieg spends billions of dollars on 7 charging stations and a bunch of DEI. Gee, something is a little off there. Man, what could it be? When the Rolling Stone releases a poll illustrating that Americans find Democrats at every level far more corrupt than Republicans, and the Rolling Stone goes, gee, somehow voters view Democrats as corrupt. This is exactly why. We're going to cut over to Reagan Reese. She's live with us over from the White House. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, going over live to the Daily Caller's White House correspondent, Reagan Reese. She's been on the show quite a bit. A lot of talk of federalization going on in D.C., man. I'm looking for troops and tanks kicking Mayor Bowser out of office. What's going on?
I know. I have to toot my own horn, Tony, for a minute, because about a month ago, I was traveling with the president to Iowa. And it was right after that intern who was interning on the Hill for Republican congressional member was gunned down just blocks from the White House. And I asked the president if he had thoughts about federalizing DC, if he wanted Congress to take back DC. And I think I put the thought in his mind, because at the time he kind of paused. He thought to himself, maybe we'll have an announcement coming. And now it's this big thing. And when you look at just all the horrible crime and murders that have happened in Washington, D.C. over the last couple of months, it's such a shame. It's such a disgrace that this is happening in the nation's capital.
The theft of the material from cabinet officials. I mean, you've got carjackings of Congress people. And this isn't a rarity. This is something that is so new that it's just becoming a statistic. DC is a festering swamp, and it should be under congressional control. So are there any additional bits of movement that we should be kind of keeping an eye out for in maybe the next couple of days or weeks? What are you hearing?
Well, yesterday, Trump floated bringing in the D.C. National Guard to help keep things under wraps here in Washington, D.C.
We're considering it, yeah, because the crime is ridiculous. I could show you a chart comparing D.C. to other locations, and you're not going to want to see what it looks like. It was just up on television, actually. They were showing it. Now, we want to have a great, safe capital, and that includes bringing in the National Guard, maybe very quickly, too.
I think the president might be taking some questions later today. Stay tuned for that. I'm here at the White House right now, kind of patiently waiting, where I hope he'll give us some more details about what he's planning to do. When Congress comes back from August recess, is he going to press them to get this done and use the influence and power he has on the Hill? So stay tuned, hoping to ask him more about these things.
Last thing, I know that you and I, in an effort to escape the doldrums of daily life, that we're about to head over with a Newsmax delegation to Israel. Obviously, I know as a sister in Christ, you're very excited to walk the steps from some of the greatest scenes in all of Scripture through history. Just out of curiosity here, I haven't asked you this yet. Is there anything specifically that you're going to be looking out for in kind of your coverage? Because we are doing some journalistic-y stuff while we're over there, Associated Press notwithstanding.
Oh, I'm not sure. Looking at the trip, it's such a remarkable trip. And I was reading the schedule to my friends last night, and I was like, okay, now on to Wednesday. And they were like, that was just 2 days. You guys are packing so much in.
They've got us. They've got us door to door.
But it does seem like we're going to be meeting with members of the military who were involved in fighting off those Iranian attacks. And to me, that's probably the most interesting part of the trip. I want to see kind of what the software is, what the military equipment is like to be in a country like Israel and constantly be fighting off attacks like this, these rockets. And so to me, that's what I'm probably going to be paying the most attention to. But honestly, Tony, I'm going in just with my eyes wide, ready to learn and listen and take in, everything. It's my first time really out of the country. And so I'm just curious and excited. It really just wide-eyed going in.
Here I was thinking that maybe I was going to be original here. And unfortunately, that's not the case, because the question that I have is about, again, Trump's fascination with the idea, the concept of the Golden Dome, the realization of Ronald Reagan's Star Wars Strategic Defense Initiative. And I want to seeing again the schedule of the military officials that we're likely to be talking to. How difficult would it be to set up similar systems? Of course, right now here in the U.S., people always wonder, how would we defend against missile attacks? One of the primary ways are through these Aegis destroyers that we have stationed across the coasts with rapid missile defense battery systems. We have a couple of THAADs, I think one down in Pensacola, et cetera. So I really do want to see more of the how we get to the campaign promise fulfillment things. This is what I'm focused on right now. We've had these promises. We've got incredible momentum. So now what are the steps to actually get the things accomplished? Federalizing Washington, D.C. is one of those things, of course. And now we're seeing incredible investments. What is it like to just watch the president rattle off after a very contentious on the market 6 months in the administration? Were you in the room when he was like going off on all of these companies that are throwing in hundreds of billions of dollars each into American infrastructure?
I wasn't, but I've actually had been talking to so many people today about just the difference between the two administrations. And covering the Biden administration, we would have maybe one thing on the schedule. It was very predictable. Maybe there'd be nothing on the schedule, be a quiet White House. Any day I wake up covering the Trump White House, it is go, go, go. From the minute I wake up, my schedule is constantly changing. And then you'll learn last minute, hey, President wants you guys in the Oval Office. He's going to take questions.
Hey, wait, is that Trump on the roof?
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what it's like. And so I think that just the rapid pace of covering the White House speaks exactly to how much he has gotten done in the last 200 days. Today is the 200th day of the second Trump
I think this is one of
administration.
the things I'm most excited for kind of our generation in media coverage here is that we have an opportunity during what's supposed to be a down news cycle to actually showcase a lot of the energy, a lot of the ambition. That's just part of the job, but also the devotion to actually getting stories seen through from start to finish in a manner that answers questions. There's so many in the legacy media sphere that are taking a backseat, kind of putting up their feet and relaxing, just echoing the same stuff over and over again. But I know over at the Daily Caller, we're trying the same stuff at the Daily Signal. We're trying to keep things fresh, not as a marketing gimmick, but because there are so many things to focus on. We owe it to our listeners and viewers to keep them up to date, even if it means that we get no sleep at all.
Well, yeah, also, this is what the American people elected. I don't think the election was just Trump versus Harris. It was legacy media versus new media. And the American people showed that they're not getting their media through the legacy media. They're sick of the narratives, the way that they're putting their feet up and kicking back. And they want these journalists who are in there, who are asking questions that they care about. They want to get their news through Twitter, through YouTube, through different platforms. And so that's what I look at my job right now. And I think there's so many people in the White House who are failing to adjust to that. And then crying about why they're maybe not getting questions or the access they used to get, or the views, and why they're getting kicked off the air. It's because you're not adjusting to the way that Americans are getting their news. And ultimately, that's our job, to listen to the American people, hear what they're saying, and report on what they want, what they're saying, what questions they want asked. And so many people here do not understand, but we do. And so that's what we're here to do.
Again, well said. And again, it's one of the things that we really do enjoy about your coverage as well. Reagan Reese over from the Daily Caller. Thanks for joining us. And I'll see you in Jerusalem.
Yeah, see you there.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the incredible. I mean, and I do want to make this clear. The Democrats have decided that right now, the way to respond to kind of all the chaos and the insanity and et cetera is to just go completely bonkers. I mean, completely 100% against the grain of the American people. There was a comment that was made earlier today that they kind of thought the Democrats were, going to moderate a little bit after the 2024 election. As we covered, as one of the only shows on the entire broadcast sphere that covered the Democrats that met in Virginia saying they wanted to moderate. And Ken Martin, the head of the DNC, slapped them down and said, no, we disavow these people. They've moved further to the left ever since. Nashville Metro Council President Pro Tem Sandra Sepulveda is now out in front of the country, because again, you have these city council people that think the internet doesn't exist, is now in front of the country claiming that ICE is arresting U.S. citizens again, just for being brown. Oh, wow. I can't believe. Here you go.
Every day we still have people who are going missing, because if it was about doing things the right way, then they would be snatching people after court. Because if you are going to work sites, then it wasn't about them being lazy.
Okay, so just as a quick aside here, you got to pick a lane, hon. You do. You have to actually pick something to tackle. We'd have to send the radio crew over to commercial. We'll be back with you guys in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, now the radio crew's over in commercial. Back to this genius. So Sandra's got a problem. First of all, she says they are disappearing people. You guys do realize that we can find each and every one of the individuals that has been arrested by ICE and is now, after they're arrested, what happens to them? They are put in a holding facility like Alligator Alcatraz, which an Obama judge late yesterday, early today, tried to block any more construction of because she said, oh, there's environmental concerns. No, that ain't going to fly. But the reason that the people are held there for 2 weeks is so they can get their extra helping of due process, more than they are entitled to. So they get like an extra little immigration hearing before they are then deported. Guys, that's not disappeared. To be disappeared means you are there one moment and then you are gone the next. We have a special segment up tonight, an interview with Margaret Roberts, one of the best interviews we've ever done on the show, on the FBI's cover-up of murders surrounding the Oklahoma City bombing of 1995. That's disappearing. You want to talk about dudes who were disappeared in prison? The FBI walks into the room, and then the individual just so happens to hang himself, just like 3 other people hang themselves in the exact same fashion. That's some disappearing stuff. Producer Nick?
I didn't know that sending people home from a place they don't belong is disappearing them.
Amazing. Did you guys know, just kind of crazy here, if I go and I trespass on, let's say, Area 51, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to run all fancy like, and I'm going to try to get in Area 51. They will detain me, and then they will send me home for, a couple of trespassing violations and felonies and things like that.
Maybe a bit of probing.
A bit of probing. You're a bad person. That's terrible. Moving on though, I do want to point out here that the Democrats saying that, oh well, ICE is just going after anybody, everybody, all the time. They're disappearing people. Try harder.
Because if it was about picking up criminals, then you wouldn't be picking up mothers, children, even U.S. citizens.
Again, the way that Tom Homan wanted to do this, he said, you in your blue states, you know where there are illegal immigrants whom have arrest warrants. Share this data with the federal government. Arrest those individuals who have criminal records and are illegal immigrants. When you stop them at traffic stops, arrest them, hold them in your county or city jails, and then we will come pick them up. How do you know this, Tony? Because in red states, that's what's going on. They're not showing up to the Home Depot as Representative, what's his name, the Latino at the Home Depot. They're not showing up to the Home Depot in Greenfield, Indiana, and picking up Hispanic illegal immigrants and carting them. No, because in Indiana, they are arrested and then they are held until ICE comes and picks them up. In blue states where they're sanctuary cities, the government has to come in, and just like any other law enforcement agencies, again, if I am at a meth house and I am in the meth house, not doing meth, just sitting there on the couch, chilling, texting, hanging out with my pals, mom spaghetti, and the cops burst in through the front door for a couple of meth arrests, I am also being arrested because I am where the crimes are taking place. I am associating with individuals actively breaking the law. Guys, if you don't know this by now, I mean, you shouldn't be in public, much less, city councilor.
Just being brown.
Being brown. Mm.
Because if it was about patriotism, you wouldn't beat the father of 3 Marines.
Again, do you know why that father was thrown to the ground? Because he came at the federal agents with an weed eater. Oh my gosh, it's just getting worse. We have to be back in a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
The scandals, they're coming in hot and heavy, and it's not getting any better. So as of the most recent, and this is Christmas early for me, I'll be honest with you, Jasmine Crockett, who I have compared to the crackhead outside of Speedway at 4 a.m. when you're going in to grab your morning Mountain Dew or Celsius, hopefully not an alcoholic one, and you are heading in. There is that, if you are in the right part of Indianapolis at the right time, or any metropolitan area near you, there might be a crackhead sitting outside the door going, hey, and you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to buy a drink. Please don't spit on me. Jasmine Crockett is in fact that individual, but we sent her to the House of Representatives. She's very, very mad because right now Texas is doing some redistricting. And by the way, complaining about the redistricting has gone horribly for every Democrat senator that's tried it. The FBI has now agreed through Kash Patel to assist the Texas Department of Public Safety in locating and perhaps, again, we're looking at some of the details here, perhaps kicking certain Texas House Democrats out of certain states and sending them back to Texas for arrest. They will be arrested once they set foot in Texas now. Jasmine Crockett, one of the representatives who's terrified of losing her seat, she is out here yelling, and I say out here because, well, listen to her.
For everyone that's been asking, where are the Democrats? Well, here they are. For everyone that's been asking, where is the fight? Well, here it is.
Frere Jacques, here I am, here we is.
But let me tell you something. Don't leave them out on a ledge by themselves.
Push them. I'm sorry. Don't.
They need to know that you, the American people, stand with them because they are standing for you.
You shouldn't stand with someone on a ledge, by the way. If you see someone that's standing on a ledge, help them off of the ledge. Don't encourage them to, do a backflip.
There's so many people that they will never meet, but they understand the importance of making sure that they have a voice when it comes to their government.
I love the argument from Democrats that, yeah, sure, you're never going to meet your representative, but they really care about their people, which is why they have fled their constituents to hide in another state with their case of beer on the tour bus, taking pictures of themselves eating salads, taking private jet flights out that are like $35,000 flights. Yeah. Oh, they're suffering for the people.
They understand the importance of standing for what democracy is and making sure that it does not fall by the wayside.
Because democracy is gerrymandering for Democrats and nobody else.
They understand that we have a Timmu Hitler in the White House right now that thinks that he is going to become the dictator of the United States. Well, I got another thing to tell you, sir. The Democrats, no matter whether we're talking about these...
No matter whether...
Texas House Democrats, or whether we're talking about the governor from Illinois, the governor from California, or whether we're talking about New York or...
She just listed 3 heavily gerrymandered states. Well, I got another thing for you, sir. We're going to get even more corrupt, Mr. Timmu Hitler. Okay. As I was talking about with CJ Pearson, who's a good influencer friend, guy that the RNC trusts for a lot of their youth development and outreach, quality guy, as he and I have discussed before, Jasmine Crockett, who, again, went to a ritzy private school, wealthy little child from a nice part, one of the only nice parts of St. Louis. The good old Jasmine Crockett, somewhere along the way, watched 8 Tyler Perry movies in a row and decided to form herself after Hollywood's idea of what a black politician should be. And where do I get off saying that? Well, according to the New York Post, 3 of Jasmine Crockett's staffers have now turned against her, alleging that Crockett is an abusive boss who routinely berates and belittles them, curses them out, refuses to go into the office, choosing instead to lounge around her luxury DC apartment while they complete all her tasks. She has her staffers do her laundry. Bro. And also, she treats her staff like an Uber service. Oh my goodness. So I really do enjoy Jasmine Crockett, who claims to be a woman of the people, treating her staff. By the way, also Jasmine Crockett, who says that she's not going back to picking cotton, treats her staff like slaves. That's about right. So incredible stuff there. Also, the BLM leaders who were caught taking all that money and then living in mansions. It's amazing how every new influencer, progressive, AOC is currently under a lot of hot water. Because allegedly, she hasn't been either engaged or married to this dude that she has been with, but she's been listing him as a spouse in order to get a bunch of benefits, which is fraud. Usually you have to be from Minnesota, and that has to be your brother for that to work. Can I get an Ilhan? Excuse me. So these young squad members who have decided the best move is just to address any kind of disquiet that they might be trying to point at Donald Trump by being even more corrupt in front of the entire country is incredible. And in case you think I am exaggerating on the corruption angle of things, James Carville has now come out and said what we have to do as soon as Trump is out of the office, we have to bring in a couple of new states into the union and then pack the Supreme Court so Republicans never get into office again. I wondered why our podcast surged ahead of the James Carville political podcast in the ratings. Maybe it's the blatant, disgusting corruption. Here you go.
The Democrats talk about democracy, and you have these people, importance of democracy and preserving democracy and saving democracy. Well, the truth of the matter is, people are right when they say this democracy is really imperfect. And they're going to have to do, if the Democrats win the presidency, the Senate and the House in 2028, which is not impossible. I don't know.
Given the bench, given the popularity of J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. By the way, I'm being given some pushback that it is not a done deal that it's Vance and Rubio in 2028. It's Vance and Rubio in 2028. I am calling it here now. And producer Nick, you will make a montage of the times that I have said that once he does receive the nominee and chooses Rubio as his VP, just for the record. There is no one the Democrats have that can debate Vance right now. Nobody. I don't even agree with Vance on a lot of things like specifics in foreign policy, yet that man could out-debate me any day of the week. The man is wildly articulate.
You say likely or possible, I don't know what word, but it's certainly not impossible. They are just going to have to unilaterally add Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia states. They're going to have to, the Constitution gives Congress power over federal elections. I don't think they can redistrict, but they're things they're going to do. They're going to have to do it.
No, we're going to talk about this in a little bit. And as much as I hate to say it, we might have to come back for just a smidgen of bonus tonus after the special. It depends. We'll look at it here. The reason that statement is bonkers, redistricting belongs to state legislatures. It is the last thing that state legislatures have. It is the last thing they have. Again, originally, state governments were in charge of electing senators and then deciding what the regions were that would elect members of the House, because Congress was supposed to come from the states. This is what it was for. The idea that state governments are basically treated like your local county government is by the state, that anytime that your state wants to send in the state police and change things, they basically can, in all but 3 or 4 states in one Commonwealth, which funnily enough is not Virginia, though its motto is Sic Semper Tyrannis, which means no dictators. Or death to tyrants. In this case, though, James Carville making the case that Congress is, totally allowed to just redistrict whatever they want. No, the Supreme Court can order a state to redistrict again because its map sucks, because of the one man, one vote precedent. That's it.
They're just going to have to do it. And they may have to expand the court to 13 members.
Oh, so if it's unconstitutional, just have to expand the Supreme Court to make it legal. Again, there's a famous line from the Revenge of the Sith, the third Star Wars movie of the aughts, in which the Jedi come in to arrest the Emperor, but right before he's the Emperor. He's still the Chancellor of the Senate. And Mace Windu says, it's going to be up to the Senate to decide his fate. And Palpatine famously says, I am the Senate. And then he, pulls out a red lightsaber and does a 720 in midair and slices a green dude in half. In this case, for James Carville to say, we're going to be as corrupt as possible, and then count on his party's ability to slice through the air and cut people in half is a little overconfident. Again, more polls are coming out every second that shows the Democrats have overplayed their hand. They are deeply unpopular with the American people. Right now, the opposition party is supposed to have a general congressional ballot favorability of 15 or 20 points in advantage over the Republicans. Right now, the average Democrat favorability is 8. 8 in the general congressional ballot. That's a warning sign of warning signs. To add insult to injury, right now, the Republicans with the American people are on average in Congress underwater by about 10 points. Democrats are underwater on average, with all of the best polls included. They are underwater with the American people by 30 points. Bro, it's that bad. It's that bad. And they're going to keep on going. Nancy Pelosi got in front of the American people and said, what we need is a national movement to give kids transgender care. Good Lord. Well, we got to send the radio crew back to commercial. We're just going to have some extra bonus tonus tonight. There's no other way around it. Radio crew, we'll see you in a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Okay, now, if you were wondering how the rest of the media and the wide world is responding to normal stuff right now and corruption in general, we got to take a look at the census. So, as of right now, the Trump administration, through President Trump, have announced that he plans to order the Department of Commerce to immediately begin work on a new, and he says, highly accurate census based on modern-day facts and figures, and importantly, using the results and information gained from the presidential election of 2024. People who are in our country legally will not be counted in the census. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So that's Trump out there saying, time for a new census. And that's a very good thing. Why is it a very good thing? Well, it just so happens that the last time the census was done, the commission has since come out 3 separate times, each time worse than the last, to announce that they counted not just illegal immigrants along with American citizens, which is not what the census is for. Again, that is essentially you're creating a slave class in the United States. But the 2030 apportionment forecast, based on population estimates and based on the Census Bureau under the Biden administration admitting that last time they overcounted blue states and undercounted red states, is just going to strip congressional votes away from places like California and Oregon, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and New York. Rhode Island as well here. Now, why bring up all this? What's really the difference there? So there are two things that are really going to hurt the Democrats in the next election. First of all, a ton of people have fled California and Oregon and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Illinois and New York. They have fled to states like Texas and Florida. So if you pretend that the census last time counted everything correctly, which they didn't, then already, according to the 2030 apportionment forecast, you would be looking at Texas gaining 4 electoral college votes and 4 seats in the House. Electoral votes, congressional seats, that's the same thing. That's what the number's based off of. Florida would also gain 4 votes. Arizona, Utah, and Idaho would also gain a vote. Now, if you add in the new population estimates based on how much the census messed up and you don't count illegal immigrants, you also see Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, Georgia, Mississippi, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri gaining additional electoral college votes. Washington State loses another electoral college vote. Oregon may lose 3. California may lose 7 electoral college votes. That is bonkers. Now Trump is bringing forward the argument that it's time for a new midterm census, and the armchair lawyers are coming out of the woodwork. Now I'm going to make an executive decision here, producer Nick. We are going to push the special for tonight. The FBI special was incredible. Back a little bit, and we are going to finish out the rest of the show talking about the census data, because everything hinges, and seriously, the next 20 years in America are going to hinge on the next couple of months with this census. And so we're going to talk about the law because the illiterates are already coming out to party. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Don't go anywhere.
Is the Tony Kinnett Cast.
It started with the whisper.
All right, producer Allison, I know I told you that we were going to air the special on the FBI's mishandling and the new revelations about the Oklahoma City bombing right now, but we have to talk about some of the census stuff. And the radio crew, they have to hear about it. Because right now, because President Trump has called for the Department of Commerce under Howard Lutnick to redraw the census, this changes everything. It really does. So first of all, DeSantis came out pretty quickly and said that he was ready as soon as Trump had the census redone, again, this time to exclude illegal immigrants who are not supposed to be counted in the census. Again, the census is to count sovereign citizens, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. Here is Governor DeSantis next to President Trump on the matter of redistricting immediately.
Ron, they include anybody that happens to be in your state.
Well, California would lose like 5 seats if they did a fair census. And even beyond that, the Biden census gypped Florida of at least 1 seat. We only got 1 seat in the last census. Are you trying to tell me that Florida only had 1 seat in that? We should have had at least 2. Texas should have had another one. That could be the difference in the House of Representatives and the majority. So I would love for them to redo the census for 26. My legislature will redistrict those lines. We'll get it to where it's fair.
Again, Florida in the last 10 years has gained 2.7 million people. There's only 300 million in the United States. If you are telling me that, again, if you broker the numbers out here, if 1% of the population has now moved to Florida and there are 538 electoral college votes, then Florida should be gaining about 5 electoral college votes and therefore congressional seats. That's just population apportionment. This doesn't even, again, we're not even talking about the fact that the Biden administration census, his own Census Bureau admitted that they counted wrong. They counted the citizens wrong. Now, let's get to some of the criticisms and the freak out and the, oh no. Democrat Representative Amy Barra from California is super angry that Trump doesn't want illegals counted in the census. And you and I know why. Because fewer people like Representative Amy Barra are going to be around because everyone in his district has gotten the heck out.
So on the subject of things that happen every 10 years, the census is one of them, and it has already happened for this decade. Yet just a short time ago, President Trump said on social media he's ordering the Commerce Department, which oversees the census, to do a new one mid-decade. What do you think is going on here?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing he did with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You know, if you manipulate the data, he understands that he's not super popular right now, that his bill that passed a couple weeks ago is going to hurt a lot of Americans.
There you go. It's all, it's because of the big, beautiful bill. They're going to try so hard on this one and it's going to go nowhere. So his argument that Trump just doesn't want illegal immigrants to vote because he's racist and he's unpopular and he's trying to rig everything. Again, the Biden administration admitted openly, they goofed up the census. This brings us to where all of the armchair lawyers are here. They're ready to describe things about the law they don't understand. Ron Filipowski, whose I guess profession these days is just being wrong all the time, says, the next part of the plan to steal the midterms and or the 2028 election is an attempt to do a mid-decade census to take seats and electoral votes away from blue states. I knew this was coming. Well, it's not taking away when the previous census was wrong. Populations have moved. I mean, again, I'm sorry, but if the reason that Wyoming doesn't have 55 electoral votes is because no one freaking lives in Wyoming. That's why the House of Representatives, which is based on population, matters. And it's why the Senate was originally supposed to be elected by state legislatures, because then states would elect the two representatives that would best govern from their state on the Senate. That's why that's all equal. House of Representatives is based on population. The Senate is based on the number of states in the union. Oh my God. Will some of you please take middle school civics? Please. I will pay for your course at Sylvan Learning. Now, the armchair lawyers have come out now and said, and by the way, some of them on the right, who I like them, I enjoy listening to their shows a lot, they have said, well, actually, even if it's a mid-year census, it would require some kind of a constitutional amendment to use that for like apportionment, because according to 13 U.S. Code 141E, it's the mid-year census. They can't be used for congressional apportionment or redistricting. Sorry, that's not in the Constitution. It's just not. That is a federal statute governing the census. However, here's the issue. According to the federal statute, there have to be no issues with the prior census. And also, according to this federal statute, the Secretary of Commerce can bring up a grievance with the previous census, which, again, on the record, the Biden administration's Census Bureau has already admitted they goofed, and goofed largely, enough to screw, as Ron DeSantis just pointed out, Florida of one congressional seat already. Now, here's the thing. We're going to go all the way back here because some of the fine folks out there have not only failed to read current U.S. law, they've also failed to read the Constitution and the documents surrounding it. So Sean Davis from the Federalist made an excellent point that the Constitution requires a full census every 10 years, but it never prohibits more frequent censuses. And this is because the most recent census was rigged, according to people in that Census Bureau, a new and accurate census should absolutely be ordered. Here's where people stopped reading whatsoever. As a reminder to everybody, James Madison's entire point in the Federalist Paper 54 was that the accuracy of the U.S. Census would be the cornerstone on which taxation and representation be built. In other words, the entire Congress, the entire U.S. Congress, the whole thing is built on the balance of taxation and representation. That's what it's for. Congress decides where the taxation goes and what representation means. The president then decides how that taxation and representation is spent at the federal level in detail, and then how those laws are executed. So, Congress' duty is not to some arbitrary 10-year term. We have this idea in society that, well, the number is 10, and because it's a number, that must mean it's sacred. No. That is just a guideline so that no one forgets to or refuses to take a census. We have to choose a number. It's arbitrary. A decade means nothing in actual legal terminology. Oh, it's a number 1 and then the 0 next to it. That means nothing. We have like 8 positions in the federal government that are on 10-year terms. Are you going to tell me that the FBI director term is somehow linked to the federal census requirement? No. Congress' duty is to census accuracy, because otherwise, you and I are not equally represented. Why is California, which is overcounted in the census, why do they have a federal tax rate that is the same as mine? If I am less represented in Congress than California, my tax rate should be equally lowered. That's why the House of Representatives is the way that it is. Now, radio crew, we have to say sayonara to you this evening. So you really need to head over to the live stream, youtube.com/dailysignal, and check out the rest of the show there. Again, we have an incredible special this evening. Do not miss it. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Now, this brings us into a little something that most on the show call bonus tonus. And in this particular instance, I am rather impressed with the leftist media on how much they have obsessed themselves with Sydney Sweeney. Again, this should not be in the news cycle at this point. It was an ad by American Eagle. Good on them for doubling down. There have been a lot of other individuals, guys and gals who are good looking, who have participated in ads again. We all celebrated. It was exciting. Whoop-de-doo. The New York Times has decided that they're going to issue a clinical look at how thin the Sydney Sweeney backlash was because GOP influencers started hammering it. Ooh, it's just a handful of online weirdos. Oh man, oh goodness, this right-wing influencer group, it shaped the Sydney Sweeney debate. I will remind you that there were people melting down over the whitening of America and eugenics. Again, the side that is trying to legalize children with Down syndrome being aborted before they are born. That side is trying to accuse Republicans of eugenics because a white girl with boobs in an ad says, for genes, said she has great genes. The insanity of the freak out that occurred after MSNBC launched pieces, the whitening of America and all this other nonsense. The hilarity of the New York Times now trying to go and whitewash any of this that ever happened. And it was just right-wing influencers that were freaking out about it. Oh, Republicans pounce. Here's the thing. You don't get to do that. You just don't get to pretend that the flood of media and news outlets that rushed to call the Sydney Sweeney ad Nazi propaganda, and you had ABC running morning shows saying that the blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl from The Anchor, trying to link it as though it was, the Lebensschwarm and Fräulein Sweeney from the Trump administration. Ridiculous. The leftist crew in the media has no idea at all, why the American people have completely abandoned them. This is a classic case. Now they're coming out with their clinical review of the entire situation, and they've decided, it's just a couple of right-wing accounts that really like boobs. Yeah, American people don't trust you. They do, in fact, have memories that are much longer than a goldfish. And this memory does stretch into the incredible revelations that have now come out regarding the Federal Bureau of Investigation and some really shady stuff that they pulled around and after the Oklahoma City bombing of 1995. So Margaret Roberts has been doing a couple of interviews. She sat down with us to dive into why her work in America's Most Wanted, when she was the news director, in cataloging and looking at different events surrounding things that she used to directly get from the FBI. You want to look at some serious conspiracies and problems that have now come to light in the Bill Clinton Federal Bureau of Investigation. This could be one of the most damning scandals that the FBI has ever faced. It makes the conspiracy surrounding MLK look like a middle school rumor about who's dating whom. That's how damning this is. So we prepared an entire special for you on this. It's really incredible. We're looking forward to it. We're going to come back to it in just a second here. Hope you enjoy it. I definitely recommend reading Margaret Roberts' Blowback as soon as it's out. So I'm getting ready to read it. It's stellar stuff here. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Everyone is looking at the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, other Department of Justice and national security agencies for the results of these decades-old investigations. And it's not very often that you actually get an inside look into how these particular investigations take place. We've got a great example of an inside look at an FBI investigation of the Oklahoma City bombing in '95. Margaret Roberts, the award-winning journalist, of course, and the former news director of America's Most Wanted. Yes, that America's Most Wanted. She's joining us today to talk a little bit about this new book. We're excited to have you. Margaret, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Tony. Great to be here.
So the '95 Oklahoma City bombing, obviously a pretty big moment in history until it was, it really wasn't out of the news cycle fully until 9/11, because it was just such a shockingly powerful, and I won't say just completely out of nowhere, but at least those at the time describe it as such, kind of a terrorist attack. What drove you to write about this particular investigation?
Well, that's right, Tony. It was a devastating moment. April 19, 1995 still stands as America's deadliest domestic terror attack. I had been the news director, as you kindly mentioned, of America's Most Wanted of a few years before the bombing, until a few years before. And so I had worked hand in glove with the FBI on the highest profile manhunts. And this was a manhunt story to start. Timothy McVeigh was captured 2 days after the bombing.
They later found McVeigh had survival gear hidden out in the desert near Kingman, Arizona. When he was pulled over and detained, the Army veteran was on his way there to hide out.
But another man, never identified, known only as John Doe 2, became the subject of a global manhunt. He rode next to Timothy McVeigh in the bomb truck, and 24 eyewitnesses saw the two of them in that truck together. So it was a manhunt story, and it captured my attention for that reason.
Two suspects now have been identified, known only as John Doe. They're both about 5'10" to 5'11", about 180 pounds, both with brown hair, one with a crew cut, the other with a tattoo. Those sketches were released as rescue workers worked their way through the wreckage of the Murrah Federal Building.
When the FBI dives into an investigation like this, it seems to be from 0 to 100 in no time at all. There's never kind of an initial investigation and then more heat is applied. This is one of those that we went from cold to ice from cold as ice to red hot immediately. And like you said, the largest manhunt the United States had seen in conceivable memory. Again, to write about this, years after the fact, obviously pulling together notes, and then of course, as much attention was spent on it at the time in this major manhunt, tying some of these threads together years later in Blowback. What is the primary stuff that you're looking for? Why give the American people and the globe at large an inside look into something that, again, was such a 0 to 60, 0 to 100 moment as it was at the time?
Well, that's a great question. And I think to connect a dot from the history of that moment to the hottest stories of today, Tony, it's about transparency and accountability. And I think, from the stories of the summer, from Jeffrey Epstein to the Russiagate hoax to JFK, and these are stories where we're collectively having this wait, what? But I thought the story happened this way. So what I have uncovered, and it took about 20 years, is another story that is just flipped on its head by my investigation. The Oklahoma City bombing was not, as we were told by prosecutors, by our news media, and now by history books, the bombing was not a case of lone wolf terror by this disgruntled soldier. Yes, Timothy McVeigh was absolutely involved, absolutely guilty, but he was not the mastermind of the Oklahoma City bombing. It was a much bigger conspiracy, and the government knew it. This was not just a tragedy, the Oklahoma City bombing. It was a failure of the truth.
Timothy McVeigh, guilty. Guilty of murder, guilty of conspiracy, guilty on all 11 federal charges that he faced in the Oklahoma City bombing trial. His conviction comes a little more than 2 years after a massive bomb shattered the Murrah Federal Building, killing 168 people, including 19 children. It was the worst terrorist act in American history, and Timothy McVeigh could now be sentenced to death.
So, I mean, that's quite the accusation when you're looking at the federal government's handling. Of course, you have bureau offices, you have the national office, of course, as a whole, that are investigating this with various law enforcement agencies that are participating, that are providing data. What is, of course, I'm not asking you to give away everything in the book, but I do want to ask, what is it that really started to show as not just perhaps a glint off to the distance that makes you do a double take, but what was the real moment that you realized, wait a minute here, this is way bigger than what's being portrayed? And like you said, in history books, I have the AP history books over here. They do say that the Oklahoma City bombing is this lone wolf style act of terrorism, just kind of in today's sense, oh, it's just like Aaron Bushnell setting himself on fire outside of the Israeli embassy. And it's painted as just this one-off moment when it isn't. What was the moment that you realized, wait a minute, people aren't getting remotely the full story here. They're not even getting half of it.
10 years after the bombing, where I really wasn't working the story at the time of the bombing, I was just watching it like millions of others. I'm a news junkie. But 10 years after the bombing, I pitched my old friends at America's Most Wanted on a 10-year anniversary story. I thought the story of John Doe 2, the accomplice who vanished into thin air like D.B. Cooper, was a great manhunt story, but they passed on the story. Yet I had done some legwork out in Oklahoma City, and I heard from a survivor, a grandmother who lost 2 babies slaughtered in that attack, who, after attending all the trials, had come to believe that the government was not telling the truth. She led me to a lawyer in Salt Lake City who really is the engine of my investigation. His name is Jesse Trinidou. I went to Salt Lake City and met him. The first words from this attorney, law professor, United States Marine, former All-American track star at USC, his words to me sitting outside his law office were, "The FBI murdered my brother."
I didn't start out to solve the Oklahoma City bombing. I didn't start out to expose the corruption on a massive level in the Department of Justice. We didn't start out to sue the government. We started out wanting justice for my brother and some modicum of support for my brother's widow and her little boy. And what I'd like to show you now is the proof beyond any doubt of my brother's murder, proof that we didn't get from the FBI until it was too late, proof that didn't come until a grand jury had found no crime, proof that didn't come until after the judge had found no murder.
That story unfolds into the fresh revelations of my investigation. Jesse Trinidou did not set out to solve the Oklahoma City bombing. He set out for justice for his brother. But the two stories become entwined, bizarrely enough, beginning with a message to the lawyer from Timothy McVeigh himself on death row, telling the lawyer that the FBI murdered his brother, Kinnett Trinidad, because they mistook him in an enhanced interrogation for a neo-Nazi terror leader named Richard Lee Guthrie, who was an associate of Timothy McVeigh's, and in my investigation, his terror organization, known as the Aryan Republican Army, becomes front and center as suspects in the bombing with McVeigh and beyond McVeigh.
Well, I mean, it certainly fits a theme of a lot of 20th century, late 20th century terrorism, in which you had these groups, these ethnocentric groups that did, in fact, participate in a lot of large-scale, local, domestic terrorism, which is interesting to say, large-scale and domestic in the same, description set. But it really is, again, we look at the number of times that Margaret Thatcher narrowly escaped death at the hands of the IRA. When you're looking at in the United States, these particular disgruntled groups, and then in Central and South America, hundreds of cases of these groups participating in these acts of localized, large-scale violence, it makes sense that the FBI would start up maybe some cold trails in that direction, but to enter into an interrogation where perhaps an investigator, perhaps a detective believes so strongly there's more to get out of the individual that they do push that person over the brink. And this particular murder and this enhanced interrogation, what was it, an induced cardiac arrest, or was it a stroke, or was it a punch that went too far?
Well, the death of Kinnett Trinidad 3 days after he was suddenly transferred from California to Oklahoma City, he was tortured and murdered, and it was immediately covered up by the federal prison there as a suicide by hanging. This became something of a Jeffrey Epstein scenario, only in this particular case, Tony, not one or two, but 3 prisoners connected to the bombing all die mysteriously.
Investigators also tied 2 of McVeigh's Army buddies to the bombing, 38-year-old Terry Nichols and Michael Fortier. Fortier quickly turned government witness for a reduced sentence. But critical evidence is found in Harrington, Kansas, inside Terry Nichols' garage. It's a sales receipt for 2,000 pounds of fertilizer purchased in a fake name with Timothy McVeigh's fingerprint on it. Investigators calling it what it is, a pretty damning piece of evidence. Nichols is charged with helping to build the bomb.
It's a very Shawshank Redemption kind of situation. I mean, really, I think that as much as I am a devotee to Occam's razor theory, and I think that it does hold quite fairly, the most simple explanation often is that which occurred, is more easy as well, the other razor to attribute something to ignorance rather than to malice. But in situations where the FBI gets a little bit too antsy and ends up making a mistake through an interrogation gone wrong, those things that do happen, that the cover-up becomes an act of insidious dishonesty against the American people. And now that we're looking back, as far back as 1995, and just for, complete transparency here, I was born in June of 1995. And so in the time capsule that was set aside after I was born, in the newspapers that day in June are still articles all about the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, the way that the news cycle moves today, we could never imagine a story staying in the paper like that for 2 months, 3 months. And yet here we are now looking at this, 30 years later. And what is very clear, very evident to see based on, of course, I'm looking forward to reading Blowback. The evidence that we're seeing is a federal agency that just believed that it would look worse for, at that time, the FBI to come forward and say, another enhanced interrogation, because of course, as you know, this would become a central part of the early Iraq and counterterrorism campaign, was the way that prisoners of war were being treated and waterboarding and things like that. After the Cold War, man, a lot of our intelligence agencies really just believed they could do whatever because they came off a victory, and so therefore, hey, we're not the KGB, so whatever we do flies. No wonder institutional trust crumbled.
Tony, you're pointing to the final layer of this investigation, which begins to uncover undercover informant after undercover informant. The prisoner's death takes on another layer because he was a dead, Kenneth Trinidu was a dead ringer lookalike for John Doe 2, that mysterious accomplice of Timothy McVeigh's in the bomb truck, who was never identified. And as we discovered, suspected informant after suspected informant, this case begins to look a great deal more like the Governor Whitmer kidnap plot than it does to the government's story of lone wolf terror. And in the end, an FBI whistleblower, one of the FBI's top spies in the 1990s, steps out of the shadow to reveal the connections between the bombing and the FBI. And the FBI definitely had Timothy McVeigh we learned this through this undercover agent under surveillance before the bomb went off.
McVeigh drove into Oklahoma City at 8:50 a.m. and at 8:57, the Regency Towers apartment security camera that had previously recorded Nichols' pickup truck recorded the Ryder truck heading towards the Murrah building. It was at that time that McVeigh lit the 5-minute delayed action fuse. 3 minutes later, he lit the 2-minute fuse and parked the Ryder truck in a drop-off zone situated under the daycare center. Then he left and docked the truck. As he headed to get his getaway vehicle, he admitted that he had dropped the keys to the truck a few blocks away. At 9:02 a.m., the Ryder truck exploded in front of the north side of the building, creating a 30-foot wide and 8-foot deep crater on Northwest 5th Street next to the building, and the blast measured 3.0 on the Richter scale. The bombing killed 168 people. The victims ranged in age from 3 months to 73 years old, including 3 pregnant women, with another 680 people injured, and it destroyed more than 1/3 of the building, which had to be demolished. It also destroyed or damaged 324 other buildings within a 16-block radius. Glass was shattered in 258 buildings and 86 cars were destroyed. The damage caused an estimated $652 million worth of damage.
Absolutely. It's just incredible. I mean, it's incredible. I'm sorry. At the height of the suspense of this conversation, that's where I'm going to leave it. That's right. You guys are getting a cliffhanger for Christmas. So you're going to have to go read Blowback. I'm looking forward to it. I'm grabbing a copy for Kindle. Margaret Roberts, award-winning journalist for a reason, and former news director of America's Most Wanted. Again, the Oklahoma City bombing has never been one, admittedly, that fascinates me as much as, for example, 9/11. As you know, as a teacher, as someone who that was a core moment kind of in my childhood, I'm fascinated with looking through that documentary, the documentaries over and over again. Oklahoma City desperately deserves Americans' attention. If we're going to rebuild institutional trust, that means you got to look at the deepest mistakes as well as the greatest victories. Margaret, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for tuning in to this interview. Make sure that you're subscribed to us over on YouTube. That's youtube.com/Daily Signal, and in the podcast down in the description. See you soon.